In other news tonight, an extraordinarily emotional day of testimony in Washington, D.C., where we heard from some of the officers who defended the U.S. Capitol on January 6th and got attacked while doing it. Police seen fighting off those rioters that day, trying to distract and divert them as lawmakers, of course, ran for cover. Those officers even barricading the main door of the U.S. House chamber at a point to make sure those lawmakers stayed safe. And today, 4 of them shared their remarkable and wrenching story. NewsNation Joe Khalil live at the Capitol tonight. And emotional, Joe, it doesn't even really, it feels like an understatement from what we saw today.
Yeah, you set it up perfectly. I mean, you put the politics of this committee aside, Rob. Their work started today on such an emotional note. You know, put it this way, how often is it in a congressional hearing that you have 2 sitting members of Congress and just about everyone who testified today all moved to tears at one point or another today? But that is exactly what we saw as these officers shared their firsthand accounts of what happened on January 6th.
The indifference shown to my colleagues is disgraceful.
I could feel myself losing oxygen and recall thinking to myself, this is how I'm going to die, defending this entrance.
An emotional day on Capitol Hill as 4 police officers relived January 6th, detailing personal accounts of being beaten, called traitors, fearing for their lives.
I knew I couldn't sustain much more damage and remain upright. At worst, be dragged out into the crowd and lynched. I did the only thing that I could do and screamed for help.
Officer Harry Dunn recounted crowds surrounding him, calling him the N-word.
No one had ever called me a while wearing the uniform of a Capitol Police officer.
More than once, their testimony eliciting emotion, even from lawmakers.
You know, democracies are not defined by our bad days. We're defined by how we come back from bad days.
Beyond the personal moments, all 4 officers called on the January 6th Select Committee to hold those responsible accountable. And they demanded more respect from sitting members of Congress who, the officers say, downplayed or denied the seriousness of January 6th.
Why is telling the truth hard? I guess in this America, it is.
Part of the healing process from recovering from the traumatic events of that day is having the nation accept the fact that that day happened.
Members of the committee say nothing is off the table for their investigation, including former President Trump's possible role.
The investigation is going to go wherever it may lead.
Meantime, Republican leaders raised questions about whether Speaker Pelosi was responsible for Capitol Police being overwhelmed on January 6th.
Why were we so ill-prepared for that day?
And so moving forward, it is possible that we end up seeing subpoenas at some point for people as high-ranking as even leader Kevin McCarthy, possibly even the former President Trump. That is something that's certainly not off the table. Rob?
Perhaps the most emotional hearing we've seen in that room in quite some time. Joe, what happens tomorrow? Where do we go from here?
So there's nothing that's specifically scheduled yet for this committee, but the committee chairman, Benny Thompson, said, you know, there's a 7-week recess that the House goes on starting next week. He says the committee is going to keep working, and they may begin work on potential subpoenas. It may take a while, especially if some people refuse to come testify. There could be some legal battle. There's also going to be investigation that's being done. Liz Cheney talked about getting phone records from the White House on that day. So it's going to be those kind of things that are really the next steps. And then we're going to have to see when they put something on the calendar so we can actually have another hearing move forward from this committee. Rob?